Hi, I'm Grace Lynch. Welcome to my channel. I thought I'd do extra Christmas video, video for celebrate the holiday. And this one is about the gift of perspective, at least as I experience it, from the things that I work with today and that have come out of what I survived. And the idea here is that I found an unexpected gift as a result of my aphakic experience. And it was sort of the intersection of the different neurological conditions that none of which I knew I had for decades after the event itself. I didn't know I experienced uh, synesthetic autism or PTSD and trauma or aphasia and brain injury. I can report that having the experience initially from August 16th, 1987, for from then on, I found myself in a cycle I couldn't escape, and that was the raw emotional and physical response to losing language and not knowing why the experience had happened and not knowing what it meant because the only apparatus that I had to decide what had happened consciously, cognitively, and understand what it means consciously and cognitively was the very tool that I had lost. And so it took me a long time to have this cycle go through and then for me to have enough distance and experience with it that it was something I could survive and take my time with. Initially, it was a very extreme kind of experience, and it was specifically having this most terrifying experience, an emotional and physiological level, and have no way to resolve the trauma or escape it or understand it. And so I there was nothing I could do to shift the unending experience of it. And so what I found was that I had the initial response when I it took me a long time to get past the stunnedness of the experience itself. And once I got past the stunnedness, then all the pain came in. Um, and so what I found was I have this intense reaction and be able, unable to do anything about it. So I found myself surviving to the end of the physiological response, the adrenaline, the cortisol, the panic, all of those things, because I did those things because they were body things, and but the body can't maintain that chemical reaction indefinitely. At least this is my sense of it. Years looking back over many years, and so when the chemistry ran its course, and I found myself currently not alive or not dead, but also not resolved, then I didn't really understand what that state of consciousness was. Um, Again, well, part of it was because I didn't have any apparatus, but also I didn't have any context either. So, and then I would try again to climb out of whatever I was in. I would try again to reestablish a sense of meaning and understanding, context, comprehension, relationship, belongingness, all of that kind of stuff. And I would scramble and do the different things, anything that I could try to rebuild that, whatever that sense. But I was not only trying to build a cognitive context, I was also trying to rebuild a sense of psychological safety, which is a physical experience. And so when I was reacquiring words, I instinctually tried to put them together back into context because my brain somehow it was trying to refigure out how to do that. But I couldn't physiologically trust any context that I built because I didn't understand what had caused the physical horrifying experience in the first place. So there was no way of me knowing that every meaning I built was not something that would contribute to a re-experience of the horror. Um, to use a more blunt image, I had no way of knowing whether my way of thinking would be the thing, and struggling to understand would be the thing that carries me out of the burning building or further into the burning building. Because there was no way for me to orient myself relative to meaning or understanding or anything. So it's a weird place. Because I had to be there and I couldn't escape it because it was physically happening to my body, I mean, the structure of my brain had been subtly altered. and I didn't understand that either. I repeatedly experienced building a response to the trauma and being unable to escape it or resolve it, and surviving past the end of all of that reactivity, and found myself again and again in a place of personal awareness that was aware of the trauma and having no physiological response. And that is a horrible place. But what I came to understand over a long, long time is that it was actually developing the ability to ride past the initial responses to psychological and cognitive trauma to an experience of self beyond the reactivity. And I did so without resolving it intellectually. It was resolved physically. So that actually became a tool that I use in my own recovery and making peace with my sobriety, working with trauma, working with understanding my particular form of neurodiversity, because it involves having accidentally stumbled on a method to go to the place of my own awareness that's at the intersection of trauma and non-trauma. The trauma was that my intellect could not resolve the horror of my experience. The non-trauma was that I actually survived. And over time, both of those became facts of my awareness, and they intersected in the moment of my noticing ongoingly that I was continuing to not die. Everything in my brain was telling me that I was in a fatal situation, and that didn't do anything, but I couldn't stop it. And then everything in my body was saying I'm still alive. Everything's going on, proceeding, and they didn't know how to relate to each other. But after a long time, I came to see at least that they knew how to intersect each other, because I could physically be in that place. And with practice, I could go there on purpose. And then with more practice, I could develop ways of finding calm in that place. And I developed techniques for myself just to survive. If I had to be there anyway, I wanted to figure out how to be there and figuratively not be on fire. It's much nicer to build home when I'm not burning. So out of self-defense, I developed techniques to re-understand language and context for the purpose of grappling first and foremost with that experience. And it became a kind of perspective. So working from that place, it's taken me a long time to understand that it accidentally gave me a way so that I don't have to exist in a binary state of either trauma or non-trauma. I don't have to fix the trauma. I don't have to escape the trauma. I don't have to deny the trauma, and I don't have to fight the trauma, because I don't have to be lost in the trauma. By having and cultivating a perspective that's at the intersection of trauma and non-trauma, which I have to build, I have to develop a relationship with meaning that isn't lost in either context. It became a still point, a place, an eye of the storm. Totally by accident. I didn't mean to do that, but whenever I'm realizing now that whenever I work with somebody in terms of helping them with their neurodiversity, the idea that I'm having behind that is to, I'm not going to know what their particular form of neurodiversity is, but by presenting it as something that unresolved causes them unresolvable trauma, and then also inescapable, and producing tools and practices to encourage them to do their own personal exploration. I'm hoping to provide a place where they can experience that perspective of the intersection. It's the same with neurodivergent recovery, 12-step recovery, and it's the same with how I work with trauma. I don't try to erase the trauma with anybody else. I don't try to make a story about it. Instead, I try to actively cultivate an awareness of my personhood that stands at the intersection of awareness of both trauma and non-trauma, outside of the instinctual reactivity to it. It's not any of the reactions. It's an awareness of self before I have the reactions, and then discovering that I can build meaning and language from that place. So I'm hoping that made some kind of sense. I just thought I'd offer it as a perspective-based consciousness. Happy holidays.